got a few minutes to talk to you about the journey, my journey, a journey of people in the town that I come from, which has been a bit of a whirlwind in the last 4 or 5 years, but has taught me an awful lot about just what potential we all have to deliver a different world to the one that we've got now. The journey starts in this place. This is Todmorden. It's not a zillion miles from here. It's in the South Pennines. It's, you know, cold and damp and gets flooded, and we've got hills and God knows what else. But when you actually marry that town with some rather funky sort of people and a fish, which I'll tell you all about more in a minute, you change it from what it used to look like to this, which is a town full of edibles all over the place. Whether it's along the canal bank, or it's in the middle of town, whether it's in the police station, or the health centre, or the school, or whatever. And we call them propaganda gardens. And I'll tell you more about those in a minute. These propaganda gardens are there in order to start conversations, so that people can have a poke around. But the really interesting thing is that on top of our own people poking around in them, we've invented a new form of tourism, which is called vegetable tourism. And people from all over the world come to have a look in our beds, quite often in the middle of winter when there's absolutely nothing there. They will have travelled from Japan and taken lots of pictures and then written an article about it, which is very, very nice and indicates, I think, that people are ready for change that's kind of coming at them from a different direction. Now, the reason we're doing all this, and it's just an experiment, and we're all volunteers, is because we've just about had it with the lack of action and urgency on the environment and on the future that we're giving to our kids and their kids beyond them. And 20 years ago, I was involved in the public sector, and I remember the Rio Earth Summit. And do you remember that? Things have got to change, they said. We've got to think about the Earth's resources, they said. We've got to take the environment seriously, they said. And 20 years on, they've done absolutely sweet FA, basically. In my estimation, there is no urgency of debate. The only debate is about economics. What on earth is the good of economics when you basically have undermined the ability of the planet on which you live to give a decent life to the people 20, 30, 40 years on? So, you know, I went away, I heard a speaker talk about the difficulties that the planet's got and the people have got and so on and so forth, and I just thought, enough. Enough. Rather than think about this and pontificate about it and write a thesis about it or whatever else it might be, why don't we just act to build a better world? I was inspired by these 2 books. One by Alan Moore about no straight lines, because the way forward is not kind of like you go from here and you go to there. The journey takes you all manner of places. And this one, about poor economics, which is about globalisation has had its day, and eventually we need to be prepared for more local solutions to our own problems. So, basically, knowing that, and because, you know, I've worked in the public sector as well as the private for about 30 years, I got on a train in London after the conference that inspired me to do something, and I made the whole thing up. I didn't consult, I didn't write a paper, I didn't do anything whatsoever. I just made it up. I got off the train at the other end, I went to see my mate Mary, and we sat down and said, "Okay, Mary, do you think we ought to just create a revolution?" And she said, "Oh God, all right." And we did. And it's been a whirlwind ever since then. So what did we actually do? Well, we thought, okay, is it possible that we can find a unifying force that everybody gets across age, income and culture? Is it possible we can find that language that allows everybody to see that they're a bit of a solution, not a problem? That allows people to start to think about their relationships differently, think about the space around them differently, think about their own motivations differently, think about is it possible we could do that in this experiment of volunteers in this little town in the north of England of 17,000 people? And if we could we replicate it? And the real answer is yes, it's entirely possible, and the language is food. And everybody can engage in it, because we have to stop being victims of the problem and start to be the finders of the solutions to that problem. We've kind of got brainwashed, haven't we, into expecting the cheque to drop through our door, or a sort of permit or a pass to enable us to build this better world around us. Well, we've got to stop doing that. We've got to stop asking people for permission to give a gift back to the future, and we've just got to take that future and do something with it. So, this model, what was invented on the train between London and Todmorden, It's basically around 3 plates, because it seemed appropriate when I was thinking about food. Community is really simple. It's what we do in our everyday lives, it's what we do in our own personal space, as we walk to the shops, as we take our kids to school, as we go to church, whatever it is. What would that look like if it was edible? Learning. What our kids learn inside school, but also the skills that we're going to need in the future, what we might share, the things that we might have forgotten. What would that look like if food was at the heart of it? And business. If we start to live in a more edible landscape, and if we start to learn more skills around food and the importance of a living environment and good soil and stuff like that, well, just maybe we might be able to spend a little bit more of our own money in local producers of local food, so that you could start to stimulate more of a local food economy. You could put money back into farming. You could start to think about the importance of the landscapes around you to feed you and yours. And if you could spin all those 3 plates together at the same time, how wonderfully resilient might your space, your town, your neighbourhood, your borough be? And just maybe we could start to be coming together as a community, to work as communities used to work, supporting each other, caring for each other, sharing more of what we've got. It's an experiment, it might not have worked, but I'm just going to tell you the story. So the community. Basically, these propaganda gardens are all over the place. Mary's is a really good example, because you need to practice what you preach. You take down the wall in front of your house, you take out your roses and your petunias and your geraniums or whatever it is, as Mary did, and you plant it up with edibles. And you put a sign there, help yourself, food for free. Because every propaganda garden, 30 odd of them in the middle of Todmorden, all of them are to share food. Not because we think this is the way to change the planet. We do not think that in 35 plots in the middle of Todmorden we're going to feed 17,000 people. But it starts to inspire people about the art of the possible. And the really interesting thing about this is the lessons that you learn from it. So after 2 years, people start to pick from these plots, because before that they were frightened, obviously, of being shot or whatever else it might be. Because they'd forgotten to scrump and pick blackberries and do all the stuff that people used to do when we were all a lot younger. There's a really interesting story, I tell it every single time, but it says to me how food can change the way people behave towards each other. A family walks up and down in front of Mary's house taking the kids to school every day. They're from the estate up at the top where some of the poorest communities live. After a period of time, some of them stop and they start to pick some of the vegetables. You know, they're herbs, they're cabbages, they're nothing very special, they're seasonal. And then the kids come back and put the outsides of the cabbage or broccoli or what the hell it was into the bin there, because they've been taught in the school about eco and what God knows, and that's brilliant. But the really important thing was the following morning, and we were up there in the Mary's window when we saw this happening. What was left on the doorstep of Mary's house was a bowl of soup made of the vegetables grown in Mary's garden from people who'd never spoken to her in their entire life. And that is how food can start to re-establish community connections. And then there's other things you do, because there's no point in having a propaganda garden where nobody can see it, so you choose the most prominent sites. And sometimes you ask and sometimes you don't. With doctor surgeries, I suggest you ask. With verges that were dog toilets and you want to turn them into great places for people to pick herbs, don't bother asking anybody, because you know, never ask a question when the answer's going to be no. Just do it. So, in front of the health centre, we went to see the doctors and we said, would you mind, thank you, would you mind that we picked up all your prickly plants, brand new health centre, 6 million quid, surrounded by prickly plants, multi-million-pound national campaign, eat 5 a day. There's a mismatch here in terms of our thinking. So we got all that, they said, yes, that's absolutely fine, as long as it doesn't cost us any money. There's a theme here, as long as it doesn't cost, that's fine. Because we do our own fundraising to do that. We are not building the Taj Mahal, we are planting fruit and vegetables. So we pulled up all the prickly plants and we planted apple trees and pear trees and herbs and all manner of things. And families come into that health centre, many families in Todmorden, irrespective of age, income and culture, would walk past strawberries or raspberries or whatever, and the kids would see what they look like in their natural state and taste them. And many kids had the foggiest idea where any of these came from, because none of them were in a plastic bag in a supermarket. So that was the health centre, and that was great. And then there was the police station. And we really love our police, so we asked them, would you mind if we got some raised beds in front of the police station? We went to a demolition site, we got some of the timbers that they were throwing out, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't start with, give me some money and then I'll do it. You just start with doing it. And the police absolutely adored it. And what was really funny is, we planted the corn, the police look after the corn, Community relations, the police will tell you this, not me, have never been better in Todd, because people walk past that and have a chat with the police. They don't feel intimidated, they have a laugh, it's a good crack. How's your con today, sir, and all that type of stuff. But also, environmental damage in the middle of the town, the police will tell you, has gone down because people don't vandalise food. Whatever you like to think, they don't. And then, of course, because boys in blue are very competitive, because the police were doing it, the fire brigade did it, and they started to plant their own cherry trees. And it's the same all over the place. We take the corner of a railway station, which is the car park, and with some guys from probation who much prefer helping you feed yourself than paint boring railings, help to build these raised beds. So people get off the station, they help themselves to put herbs on the platform, they then take the kids out, they might pick, I don't know, they might show their kids how to pick on the station seeds, so they've got caperberries, or they may dig up some potatoes or rocket or whatever else it is. And if they take the lot, you just replant it. It's cost you absolutely sweet FA, so you might as well just make people happy and sharing and reconnected with the soil. And that's community, and there's lots of other examples to come and visit us in Todd. And then there's the learning. You need to learn how to grow, you need to learn how to cook, you need to reconnect with giving yourself a decent meal for less. And we've forgotten a lot of that stuff. Now, some of it might be taking over interesting spaces, because trying to crack the national curriculum is not an easy thing to do. But we're not to be put off, so we're starting in disused tennis courts. And we build some raised beds there, and they're adopted by the people on one of our other estates. And, you know, out of the blue, people that never spoke to each other suddenly knock on each other's door and say, how do you grow beans, or how's your cauliflower coming on, or whatever else it might be. And local people are, there's 30 odd of them now in this tennis court. And then, because we thought we were really interested, we managed to persuade the local authority a little while ago to work with the school, to work with the kids to get them a BTEC in agriculture. Now, we are not in, you know, the leafy glades of Evesham or in North Yorkshire. This is the South Pennines, so kids weren't doing horticulture, agriculture or whatever. And what's happened is that because the town cares about local food, kids are now taking that course. And kids that were never coming out with any qualification whatsoever are now coming out with the first qualification in their life. And because that was really encouraging, we had a bit of a brainstorm, which was to get some money from the lottery, which we won, to build an aquaponics unit. And at the back of the high school, which was a failing school, on spare land which was never being used, we have created an edible landscape. We are building an aquaponics unit, cutting edge, sustainable fish production, hydroponics, permaculture, trees, bees, you name it. So again, as well as a health centre, we've got kids every day of their life coming to and from a school, so an edible landscape is second nature to them. This is the demonstration unit actually within the school, where the fish are being grown and the pollutants, and so the nutrients from the water are feeding watercress and so on and so forth, and it's a full life cycle. And kids are coming out with qualifications now in some cutting edge technology. And there's lots of other things we do. You know, some schools don't have any grounds whatsoever, but they've got a graveyard next to them. So, hey, what do? You grow in the graveyard where, as we know, the soil is very good. So, these kids are not only growing their own food now, but they are not frightened of going in that graveyard. Through food, you change behaviour. And then you share each other's skills and you learn some of the old tricks in the past so you can eat decent food over winter. And then there's business. You work and live in an edible landscape. You're learning about seasonal food. You're respecting the bees, all the other stuff. So therefore you start to reconnect with local businesses and you want to support your local farmers. So you go and have a meeting with local farmers and you say to them, oh, we're really keen on supporting your local food. And the farmers say, oh, what does this woman want? And they sit there really grumpy. So I thought, never to be put off. I know what I'll do. I'll create a brand loyalty around one product, and we'll get more and more people asking for that product so that local farmers will say, hey, there could be some money in that, and that will be the way to show them that we mean what we say when we want to support local food producers. So we make up a campaign because it makes us laugh called Every Egg Matters, and we draw a stylised map of Todmorden, and we put on it people who are selling eggs to each other from their garden gate. We start with 4, we've gone to 64. The result of that means that people are going into local shops in the market asking for eggs. So some farmers are getting, you know, they can see which way the wind's blowing, and they decide that they will start to up their flocks of free-range birds, and then that goes on to meat birds, and then that goes on to pigs, and so on and so forth. And slowly, you're seeing more market stalls with local food on the local market. And this is just an experiment of volunteers. No business society, no national organisation, no government bodies giving us a single penny to help stimulate this business activity. It's just the power of stimulating demand, because people recognise it's time to think more locally about what they're spending their money on. So another thing we do is give some blackboards, which cost you 15 quid each. This is not an expensive operation to anybody in the market that's selling local food, and they scribble that up, and that incentivises people to go there. And as a result of that, lots of different businesses, from beer to bread to cheese, and lots of different cafes are now selling local food. And interestingly enough, in a local survey that students did for us, 46% of food businesses in Todmorden, which is a pretty poor town, said that their bottom line had improved since we'd been doing Incredible Edible Todmorden. And who else is sharing the journey? Well, there's lots and lots of people. We've got 35 different groups of people in this country that are doing Incredible Edible. Some of them are big and sorted with committees and God knows what. Some of them are small and just passionate to get on with the job with their mates. This is in Northern Ireland. It's fantastic. Catholics and Protestant children working together to produce food for their community all over the world. There's lots of little leaves. More than 100 communities are doing Incredible Edible. Just people ready for change. People ready to take personal responsibility for their environment and their own future, instead of waiting for somebody else to invent a policy to do it. You know, you're a long time dead, you might as well roll up your sleeves and get on with it. And then there's joining the dots. What could we actually do as ordinary folks in our community to actually marry community with learning with business? Well, you get a bit of land up there from your local garden centre, who gives it you. You get some money from a local trust and you put this cold-it's-like fence around it, because there's lots of little creatures who want to nibble away all your vegetables all the time. And you turn it into that, which is a market garden training centre. And that was because the kids at the high school had nowhere to go once they got their qualification. So Nick and his team of volunteers, all done with volunteers, created all these beds so that the kids can start to feel the soil under their fingers and get interested in a future. And we've now got 5 apprenticeships in this particular social enterprise which we've set up, and in the one at the aquaponics unit which we've set up, so that there is a chance for people to retain those skills and stay in the town and get a job and be the farmers of the future. And then the good old veg tourists. What can we do for them? So we created an edible green room, which links all the places all around town where all our beds are, telling about the stories of pollination, help yourself to herbs, help yourself to all manner of things. It was designed by 2 students at Goldsmiths College in London who really wanted to just help us, and they came up and they helped us design it. And not to be put off with that, hey, we're going for it. We're going to go coast to coast. We're going to make the whole of the North West and Yorkshire edible. And we're going to start at Liverpool, so come on guys, get your act together, and we're going to go right the way through to Hull. It's a project we're doing jointly with the Royal Society of Arts and Manufacturing, and I'm really serious about it. Not only are we going to have all those places that have already got little leaves on it, all the towns that are already Incredible Edible, but we're looking for universities and hospitals, we're looking for prisons, and we're looking for schools, and we're looking for institutions or private sector establishments that want to create edible landscapes. And the reason for this is, we've heard about brand loyalty. You know, it's a no-brainer. If you create a landscape in which people live their lives, where things are edible, in 10 years' time, a child of 8 moving to 18 has a different concept of their responsibility in the world and what's possible for them to do to look after them and theirs. So Liverpool, you've got Hoylake there, there's a few odds and ends. I'm telling you, Manchester Met and Leeds Met are in competition to go for the first edible campus. There is no reason why you couldn't get in there if you really put your finger out. So what are the journeys? Because, you know, we're doing all this, but we're not bonkers. We're doing all this in order to bend budgets, bend arguments, bend politicians' thinking, because the people are way ahead of the politicians on this one. There's so many things that could be done that would make life so much easier so every community could become edible. These are them. Local authorities, come on, you've loads of spare land. Why do we go through this victim mentality of I'm not on an allotment list? There's oodles of land. You'd put in a land bank and you let the community, as of right, grow their food on it. Bend your budgets. Bend what's happening in your parks. Bend what's happening in your countryside. Support people to grow their own. Empower wellbeing boards to drive forward the model. Turn your parish councils. Food at the house and neighbourhood plans. You know, you don't need a bureaucracy. This isn't about a new check. It's just using what you've got smarter. Proactively support local markets and NHS. Come on. Let's have edible landscapes everywhere. Let's show people how to live happier and healthier. And at the end of the day, ultimately, the thing I have learned more than anything in the world that is truly awesome is the power of small actions. Because through what we are all doing in our 100 communities all over the world, it's almost organic, but we're starting to believe in ourselves again. Because we can see the results of these small actions. We're starting to invest in our own capacity to build a different and a better world. And that's Incredible Edible.